Welcome to MindSprout. All right, today we're going to dive deep into the Jacobean world of English literature. We're going to look at what really made this age tick, all the key features of this, dark, complex, but totally fascinating time.
Right. So everyone knows about Shakespeare's Golden Age, right? But what happened when it all came to an end? Well, that's what we're digging into. That turbulent, fascinating era right after Queen Elizabeth I. And let me tell you, this was a time of huge change and anxiety. It didn't just, tweak English culture a little bit, it totally redefined the whole thing.
So, let's set the scene. A new king, anxious times. Picture this. The 17th century is just kicking off, and there's this feeling of major uncertainty in the air. England's moving from this super long, pretty stable Elizabethan era into something totally new, the Jacobean Age. And with that shift came a new king and, a lot of national unease.
Okay, so in 1603, Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, dies without any children. So who takes over? Her cousin, James VI of Scotland. He rides down to London and becomes James I of England. Now this was a huge deal. You've got a Scottish king on the English throne, uniting the crowns, and it basically kicks off this brand new kind of politically restless age.
And get this, just 2 years into James's reign, you have the gunpowder plot. You've heard of it, right? Guy Fawkes and all that. This was a failed attempt by a group of English Catholics to literally blow up the king and parliament. Can you imagine? It sent these massive shockwaves through the entire country, and that created this climate of fear, paranoia, and division that really, really defined the whole era.
So all that anxiety, all that paranoia, it wasn't just stuck in the halls of Parliament. No way. It spilled right out onto the stage, and it completely transformed theater into something totally different from what people were used to seeing under Queen Elizabeth.
The whole focus of drama just shifted. Think about it. Elizabethan plays, a lot of them were about the personal lives of kind of ordinary folks. But Jacobean theater, it got obsessed with the big stuff. We're talking the high-stakes world of royalty, the clergy. It was all about political intrigue, where one person's decision could bring the whole court crashing down. Huge consequences.
And it wasn't just the stories that changed. The actual places where people watched plays changed too. The huge open-air theaters like Shakespeare's Globe, where everyone from the groundlings to the gentry could go, they started to get replaced. Instead, you get these smaller, more intimate indoor theaters. Imagine that, lit by candlelight, super atmospheric, but also way more exclusive. This was theater for the upper crust.
So, you can probably guess what happened to the overall tone, right? That kind of broad, often optimistic vibe of Elizabethan drama? Gone. It was replaced by something way more sophisticated, cynical, and just pessimistic. To put it simply, Jacobean plays were a whole lot darker and more complex.
Okay, so how exactly did this darker, more cynical tone actually show up on stage? Well, it found its ultimate home in the most popular and probably most shocking genre of the day, a type of play that just perfectly captured the spirit of the age.
We're talking about the revenge tragedy. Seriously, this genre dominated the Jacobean stage. These were plays that just dove headfirst into humanity's darkest impulses. The whole plot usually revolved around someone trying to get vengeance, because in the world of the play, the official justice system was seen as totally corrupt and broken.
And here are the key ingredients, the hallmarks of a good revenge tragedy. It's almost like a checklist of everything society was anxious about back then. You've got an obsession with death, lots of explicit violence and gore right there on stage. You've got corrupt leaders and institutions all over the place. And there's this real deep dive into psychology and madness. Plus, you often get supernatural stuff like ghosts. And, this is really interesting, these incredibly strong female characters who, almost without fail, are doomed from the start.
And this line, wow, I am Duchess of Malfi still. It's from John Webster's masterpiece, and it just perfectly captures the defiant spirit of these female characters. When she says this, she's not just talking about her title. No, it's so much deeper. She's asserting her core self, her identity, right in the face of death, all because she dared to defy the rules and marry the man she loved.
This all leads to a really key idea, moral ambiguity. In a lot of earlier plays, it was pretty clear who the good guys and the bad guys were. But Jacobean drama, it lived in the gray areas. Your heroes are deeply flawed. Your villains, well, sometimes you kind of feel for them. The line between right and wrong gets so blurry, it's almost impossible to see. And it really forces you, the audience, to question your own sense of morality.
Okay, so this wave of cynicism and this new love for complex ideas wasn't just happening in the theaters. It was everywhere. It completely reshaped the world of prose and poetry, too.
And a key player in all this was the philosopher Francis Bacon. He was a huge deal. He basically looked at the old way of learning, just reading and memorizing what ancient guys like Aristotle wrote, and said, nope, there's a better way. He championed a whole new way of thinking, arguing that real knowledge has to come from observation and reason, from what you can actually see and test. He was basically laying the groundwork for the modern scientific method.
And that leads us to his most famous line, knowledge is power. It just perfectly captures this new spirit, right? For Bacon, knowledge wasn't just about sitting in a library. It was a practical tool. It was something you could use to understand the world and then, ultimately, to shape it, maybe even control it.
Now, over in the world of poetry, all this intellectual energy gave us a group of writers we now call the metaphysical poets. Now, they weren't like an official club or anything, but they were all kind of on the same page, sharing this love for being witty, intellectually complex, and just using language in these wild, inventive ways.
Their signature move was something called the metaphysical conceit. And this is not your average metaphor. It's way more intense. It's a bold, super clever, extended comparison between two things that seem to have absolutely nothing in common. The whole point was to jolt the reader, to force you to see the world differently by, as one critic famously said, yoking these totally different ideas together by violence. It's a pretty intense image, huh?
And the absolute master of this was John Donne. His most famous example, he compares the souls of two lovers who are apart to a drawing compass. You know the kind you used in math class? Think about it. One leg of the compass stays put in the center, while the other one roams around it. But they're always connected, and together they make a perfect circle. It's such a startlingly clever intellectual image, but it's also deeply emotional. That's the magic of the conceit.
All right, so we've taken this journey into a pretty dark and complex literary world. So what's the big takeaway here? What is the lasting legacy of this Jacobean Age?
You can think of the literature from this time as a kind of dark mirror. It reflects a society that was seriously grappling with huge political and social changes. And what you see in that mirror is a world defined by cynicism, an obsession with corruption, a really deep dive into the human mind, and a real comfort with things not being black and white, with moral ambiguity.
And that's why this stuff still matters. The Jacobean era's writers were fearless. They were fascinated with the dark side of power, the dark side of human nature. And because of that, they created this incredibly powerful and timeless body of work. They asked tough questions about justice, about corruption, about morality, and really, you have to ask yourself, why do these questions, 400 years later, still feel so incredibly urgent today?